Clara Vance moved through the manicured pathways of Sterling Park as if navigating a hostile territory. Each chirping bird was an annoyance, each laughing child a distraction from the storm raging in her mind. Her gallery, the Vance Modern, a temple of minimalist white walls and polished concrete floors, was facing a crisis. Her headline exhibition, a multi-million-dollar kinetic sculpture by the notoriously difficult artist Henri Dubois, was a structural nightmare. It was beautiful, ethereal, a cascade of gleaming steel and delicate glass, but it was also fundamentally unstable. Her chief engineer had uttered the words that now echoed in her skull: "It's a catastrophic failure waiting to happen." Investors were calling. The press was waiting. And Clara, the unflappable titan of the art world, was beginning to fray. It was in this state of controlled panic that she saw him. He was a fixture of the park, a man who seemed to have been carved from the same weathered wood as the bench he occupied. His coat was a patchwork of fading colors, his beard untamed, his presence as unassuming as a shadow. In his calloused hands, he held a stub of charcoal and a crumpled piece of butcher paper. Clara's first thought was one of dismissive pity. Another lost soul, sketching away the hours. She saw only a homeless man, a statistic, another forgotten fragment of the city she so expertly curated for the wealthy. But she was about to discover that the hands holding that charcoal stub held the power to save her gallery, her reputation, and perhaps even her own hollowed-out soul. She was about to learn that true genius does not always announce itself from a pedestal. Sometimes, it sits quietly on a park bench, waiting not for recognition, but simply for the light to be right. This is the story of how a single, overlooked sketch changed everything. Samuel Blackwood was 54 years old, though the city's harsh seasons had etched another decade onto his face. He measured his life not in days or weeks, but in the slow depletion of his charcoal sticks and the dwindling supply of scavenged paper in his worn leather backpack. That backpack was his home, his vault, his entire world. Inside, nestled amongst a threadbare blanket and a single, well-loved book of poetry, were hundreds of sketches. They were not idle doodles. They were studies in light and shadow, explorations of form and function. There were breathtakingly detailed portraits of strangers who never knew they were being observed, their fleeting expressions of joy or sorrow captured with profound empathy. More than that, there were buildings. Soaring, impossible structures that seemed to defy gravity, community centers that curved like embracing arms, bridges that flowed like frozen rivers. They were the ghosts of a life he no longer lived. He had once been architect Samuel Blackwood, a name whispered with reverence in the halls of design schools. His masterpiece, the Crestwood Community Library, had won him the Pritzker Prize, the highest honor in his field. It was a building that breathed, a space that used natural light and organic materials to foster a sense of peace and learning. He had been on top of the world, with a loving wife, Amelia, and a bright-eyed daughter, Rose, who had her mother's smile and his own fascination with how things fit together. Then, one rain-slicked night, a drunk driver had stolen them from him, leaving Samuel in a silent world of grief. He had tried to work, to pour his pain into his designs, but the spark was gone. The final blow came when he was hired by a powerful development firm. He discovered their flagship skyscraper project was using substandard materials and a flawed structural design, a disaster waiting to happen. He refused to sign off. He went to the press. The developer, a man with deep pockets and no conscience, didn't just fire him, he systematically destroyed him, blacklisting him throughout the industry until no one would hire the difficult and unreliable Samuel Blackwood. His fortune dwindled, his will eroded, and he eventually slipped through the cracks, landing on the streets with nothing but the ghosts in his head and the genius still flowing through his fingertips. He sketched not to be seen, but to remember who he was. Clara Vance, at 42, lived in a world meticulously designed to insulate her from the messiness of life. Her apartment was a penthouse of glass and steel, offering a panoramic, godlike view of the city Samuel slept in. Every surface was sterile, every object a curated piece of art. Her success was undeniable. She had inherited a small, respectable gallery from her father and, with a ruthless business acumen and an unerring eye for profitable trends, transformed it into a global brand. She wore tailored suits that felt like armor and maintained a professional distance from everyone, including her own staff. But her success was a gilded cage. She had started as a passionate painter, a young woman who believed art could change the world. That belief had been shattered by a mentor who stole her early work and passed it off as his own, a betrayal that had cauterized her idealism. She had vowed then to never be a victim again, to be the one in control, the one who set the prices. In doing so, she had lost the very thing that had drawn her to art in the first place, its soul. Her life was a series of transactions, her gallery a showroom for investments. The impending failure of the Du Bois exhibition felt less like an artistic tragedy and more like a catastrophic market downturn, and that realization left a bitter, metallic taste in her mouth. She was rich, powerful, and utterly, profoundly alone. Their worlds collided on a crisp autumn afternoon. Clara was walking through the park with Julian, her gallery manager, a man whose ambition was matched only by his sycophancy. He was complaining about the engineer's latest failure to stabilize the sculpture when he gestured dismissively toward Samuel's bench. "Look at that," Julian sneered, his voice dripping with condescension. "Every day. You'd think he'd have something better to do." Clara glanced over. Samuel was hunched over a large piece of cardboard, his focus absolute. He was sketching the very sculpture that was causing her so much grief, but not as it stood in her gallery. In his drawing, the sculpture was reimagined, anchored to a new, elegant base that seemed to grow organically from the ground, its delicate arms perfectly counterbalanced. It was a solution so simple, so intuitive, it was breathtaking. But Clara, blinded by her stress and Julian's casual cruelty, saw only presumption. "Some people have nothing but time to dream," she said, her voice colder than she intended. The words were meant to align her with Julian, to reinforce the invisible wall between her world and Samuel's. As if summoned by her disdain, a sudden gust of wind tore through the park, lifting the piece of cardboard from Samuel's grasp. It tumbled end over end, landing directly at Clara's expensive leather shoes. Julian bent down to pick it up, a smirk playing on his lips. He held it up for her to see. The drawing was even more remarkable up close. The lines were clean, confident, and precise. There were faint mathematical notations in the margins, calculations of weight and stress distribution. It was not a dream, it was a blueprint. "Quite the engineer, isn't he?" Julian chuckled, his laughter sharp and unkind. Probably designing his next cardboard box mansion, he looked at Samuel, who was now standing, his eyes filled not with anger, but with a quiet, profound sadness as he watched them hold his work. Without another thought, Julian let the cardboard slip from his fingers. It landed face down in a muddy puddle left by the morning sprinklers. The ink from a cheap pen began to bleed, the elegant lines blurring into an ugly smudge. "Let's go, Clara. We have real problems to solve," Julian said, turning his back. Clara hesitated for a fraction of a second. She saw Samuel walk over, gently retrieve the ruined drawing, and try to wipe the mud away with his sleeve, a look of deep loss on his face. In that moment, she felt a sharp, unexpected pang of shame. She turned and walked away, the image of the ruined sketch burned into her memory. The image haunted her. Through a tense meeting with the engineers and a terse call with a furious Henri Du Bois, she couldn't stop seeing the confident lines, the elegant solution sketched on a piece of trash. It was an artist's eye recognizing another's, a flicker of her old, passionate self stirring beneath the cynical armor. The drawing wasn't just good, it was brilliant. The casual cruelty of Julian's dismissal, and her own complicity in it, gnawed at her. Who was this man? The next day, she told Julian she was feeling unwell and needed the morning off, an unheard of event. She didn't go home. She went back to Sterling Park. She wore simple jeans and a plain coat, feeling like an intruder in her own city. She found the bench empty. A sense of disappointment, sharp and surprising, washed over her. She asked a vendor selling hot dogs if he'd seen the man who sketches. Samuel? Oh, sure, the vendor said, wiping the counter. He's not here on Tuesdays. He volunteers. He gave her the address of a rundown community center in a part of town her driver actively avoided. Driven by a compulsion she didn't understand, Clara found herself in front of the St. Jude's Community Center, a brick building whose faded murals spoke of a more optimistic time. Peering through a grimy window, she saw him. Samuel was standing in the middle of a brightly lit room, surrounded by a dozen children of all ages. He wasn't just sketching. He was teaching. He was demonstrating the concept of a two-point perspective on a large, battered chalkboard. His voice, which she had never heard, was calm and deep, his explanations patient and clear. He moved from child to child, kneeling beside them, guiding their small hands, offering gentle encouragement. He was showing a young girl how to draw the corner of a building, explaining how the lines converge at a vanishing point. He wasn't just teaching them to draw, he was teaching them to see. There was a light in his eyes, a passion in his posture, that she hadn't seen in her own gallery in years. This was not a man lost to the world, this was a man actively, generously giving his world to others. Clara stood in the cold, watching for nearly an hour, the wall of her certainty crumbling brick by brick. That afternoon, she did something she hadn't done since her divorce. She called the private investigator her lawyers kept on retainer. "I need you to find out everything you can about a man," she said, her voice firm. "His name is Samuel. He spends his time in Sterling Park and volunteers at St. Jude's on Tuesdays." The report arrived in a sealed digital file less than 24 hours later. Clara opened it in the sterile silence of her office, the city lights twinkling below like a distant, unfeeling galaxy. She read it once, then twice, her breath catching in her throat. Samuel Blackwood. The name was there in stark black and white, followed by a list of accolades that would make any architect weep with envy. The Pritzker Prize. The AIA Gold Medal. Designs for buildings that were now iconic landmarks. Then came the newspaper clippings about the car accident, the heart-wrenching obituaries for Amelia and Rose Blackwood. Finally, the articles detailing his public battle with Titan Development, his accusations of structural fraud, and the subsequent, vicious smear campaign that had professionally erased him. It all clicked into place. The precision of his lines, his innate understanding of structure and balance, the profound sadness in his eyes. He wasn't a homeless man dreaming of buildings, he was a master architect who had lost everything but his integrity. The sketch he had made wasn't just a doodle, it was an instinctive, elegant solution from a mind that had once shaped skylines. The shame Clara had felt in the park returned, tenfold, burning like acid. She hadn't just misjudged a man, she had desecrated a master. The call came an hour later. It was her chief engineer, his voice tight with panic. "Clara, it's worse than we thought. The central torsion spring has a microfracture. If we turn on the motor, the whole upper section could shear off. Du Bois is on a plane, he'll be here tomorrow. We're done. The show is impossible." The silence in Clara's office was absolute. All her money, her connections, her power, they were useless. Her experts had failed. Her multi-million-dollar centerpiece was a beautiful, ticking time bomb. The world she had so carefully constructed was about to implode. And in that moment of total desperation, she knew there was only one person on earth who might be able to help. Finding Samuel was not difficult. He was on his bench, as always, sketching the setting sun as it cast long shadows across the park. Clara approached slowly, her expensive shoes silent on the gravel path. Her heart hammered against her ribs. For a woman who negotiated with billionaires and stared down the world's most intimidating artists, she had never felt so small. He looked up as her shadow fell over him, his eyes wary. "Mr. Blackwood," she began, her voice barely a whisper. The name felt foreign and important on her tongue. A flicker of surprise crossed his face, but it was quickly replaced by a weary resignation. I came to apologize, she said, the words feeling clumsy and inadequate. For my associate's behavior. For my own. What we did to your drawing was inexcusable. I am so sorry. Samuel simply nodded, his gaze returning to the horizon. Clara took a deep breath. This was it. I know who you are, she continued. I read about your work. The Crestwood Library, it's a masterpiece. For the first time, a genuine emotion surfaced in Samuel's eyes, a deep, aching sorrow. That was a long time ago, he said, his voice raspy. Genius like that doesn't just disappear, Clara insisted, her own desperation making her bold. She unrolled a set of the sculpture's blueprints, the crisp paper a stark white against the weathered wood of the bench. I'm in trouble, Mr. Blackwood. My gallery, we have a piece, a sculpture. It's structurally unsound. My engineers can't fix it. They say it's impossible. But I saw your drawing. I believe you can. She laid the blueprints before him. It was a plea, a complete reversal of the world's established order. The powerful gallery owner, begging for help from the homeless man she had scorned. Samuel looked from her face to the complex schematics. For a long moment, he said nothing. He simply stared at the drawings, his architect's mind instinctively deconstructing the flawed design, seeing the points of stress, the fundamental errors in calculation. He traced a line with a calloused finger, his expression shifting from weariness to intense concentration. The world around him seemed to fade away, replaced by the pure, beautiful language of physics and form. He was no longer Samuel the vagrant. He was Samuel Blackwood, the architect. I'll take a look, he said quietly. The scene at the Vance Modern was one of barely contained chaos. A team of engineers stood around the sculpture, looking defeated. Julian was pacing, his face pale, barking into his phone at the gallery's insurance agent. When Clara walked in, followed by the quiet, shabby figure of Samuel Blackwood, the entire room fell silent. Julian ended his call abruptly. Clara, what is this? Who is this? He demanded, his eyes wide with disbelief and indignation. This is Samuel Blackwood, Clara announced, her voice ringing with a newfound authority. And he is here to help. One of the engineers, a senior man with graying hair and an expensive suit, stepped forward. With all due respect, Madam Vance, we have 3 of the top structural engineers in the country here. This problem is beyond a simple fix. We can't possibly allow an amateur to. Samuel paid them no mind. He walked slowly around the enormous sculpture, his eyes scanning every joint, every gleaming surface. He placed a hand on one of the main supports, closing his eyes as if listening to the stress in the metal. The engineers exchanged scornful looks. Julian looked as if he was about to physically throw Samuel out. After a full 10 minutes of silent observation, Samuel walked to a large table covered in the discarded blueprints. He picked up a thick carpenter's pencil. He didn't use a ruler or a computer. On a fresh sheet of vellum, with swift, impossibly steady strokes, he began to sketch. He drew a system of microbraces, a delicate, web-like structure that would be almost invisible from the front. It didn't fight the sculpture's flawed design, it worked with it, redistributing the kinetic energy along a new, harmonious pathway. It was an idea born not of textbooks, but of a profound, intuitive understanding of force and elegance. It was less an engineering fix and more a work of art in itself. He finished and slid the drawing across the table. The lead engineer picked it up, his skepticism warring with his professional curiosity. He studied it, his eyes widening. He passed it to his colleagues. A low murmur went through the group. They pulled out calculators, ran frantic simulations on their laptops. My God, the lead engineer finally whispered, looking at Samuel with a new expression of awe. This is brilliant. It's unconventional, but it will work. It will actually make the entire structure stronger than the original design. Julian stood frozen, his mouth agape. He looked from the genius on the page to the quiet man in the threadbare coat, and for the first time, he seemed to understand the colossal scale of his misjudgment. The gallery opening was the event of the season. The art world's elite drifted through the space, sipping champagne, their faces illuminated by the soft gallery lighting. At the center of it all, Henri Dubois's sculpture moved with silent, fluid grace, its gleaming arms sweeping through the air in a perfect, stable dance. It was a triumph. Toward the end of the evening, Clara stepped up to a small podium, tapping the microphone. The chatter died down. "Thank you all for coming," she began, her voice clear and steady. "Tonight, we are celebrating a magnificent work of art. But we are also celebrating a miracle. A few days ago, this exhibition was on the verge of cancellation. This beautiful sculpture you see before you was a broken thing. The finest experts told me it was unsolvable." She paused, her eyes scanning the crowd until they found him. Samuel was standing near the back, by the coat check, looking uncomfortable in a new, simple suit she had bought for him. He had tried to refuse, but she had insisted. "The experts were wrong," Clara continued, her voice resonating with emotion. "The person who saved this piece, who saved this gallery, is not a famous artist or a celebrated engineer. He is a man of quiet dignity and extraordinary talent, a man to whom I and my gallery owe an apology and a debt of gratitude I can never fully repay." She gestured toward Samuel. "Ladies and gentlemen, I would like you to meet the brilliant architect who made tonight possible. His name is Samuel Blackwood." A confused murmur rippled through the crowd. The name was familiar to some of the older patrons. Clara went on, her voice ringing with conviction. She told them the whole story, of his past achievements, of his tragic loss, of his unwavering integrity in the face of corruption, and of her own blindness. She didn't spare herself, detailing her initial scorn and Julian's humiliating actions in the park. It was a raw, public confession, a dismantling of her own carefully constructed image. By the time she finished, the room was silent. All eyes were on Samuel, no longer with pity or confusion, but with a dawning, profound respect. The applause started as a ripple and grew into a thunderous ovation. Samuel looked overwhelmed, a man unaccustomed to the light, but as he met Clara's gaze across the room, he gave a small, grateful nod. His vindication was complete. The next day, in her office, Clara slid a contract across her polished desk toward Samuel. It offered him the position of a consulting designer and structural artist in residence for the gallery, with a salary that would have allowed him to buy a penthouse larger than her own, a company car, and a limitless expense account. Samuel looked at the contract but didn't pick it up. "Thank you, Clara," he said, his voice gentle. "This is more than generous. But it's not what I want." Clara's heart sank. "What is it you want, then?" "Anything. Name it." "You have resources," Samuel said, looking out the window not at the skyline, but down at the streets below. "And I have designs. Hundreds of them. Not for galleries, but for people. For communities. I want to build a clinic in the East Quarter. A new playground for the children at St. Jude's. A public space where people can just be." He looked back at her, his eyes clear and purposeful. "I don't want a salary. I want a partner. Let's use the gallery's profits to start a foundation. The Blackwood Foundation. We can use art and design to rebuild the parts of this city that everyone has forgotten." Clara stared at him. He was offering her not a transaction, but a purpose. A way to reconnect her world of high art with the real world, to find the soul she had lost so long ago. A genuine, radiant smile spread across her face for the first time in a decade. "Yes," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "Yes, Samuel. Let's do that." she pushed the lucrative contract into the trash bin without a second glance. Their partnership transformed them both, and in time, it began to transform the city. The Blackwood Foundation became a force for radical good. Their first project was a state-of-the-art youth center, built from one of Samuel's old designs, right next to St. Jude's. It was a beautiful, light-filled space with a free art studio, a workshop for teaching design principles, and a small library. Samuel oversaw every detail of the construction, while Clara, with her formidable business skills, navigated the city's bureaucracy and rallied donors from the art world. A humble Julian, at his own insistence, became the foundation's volunteer financial manager, his sharp mind now dedicated to stretching every dollar to maximize its impact. He spent his weekends at the center, helping kids with their homework, his old arrogance replaced by a quiet, determined humility. Years passed. The foundation flourished. They built affordable, beautifully designed housing for the homeless, transforming derelict lots into places of dignity. They launched an apprenticeship program, where Samuel taught a new generation of young architects from disadvantaged backgrounds, instilling in them not just the principles of design, but the ethics of service. One of his first students, the young girl he had taught perspective to that day Clara first saw him, won a full scholarship to his own alma mater. Clara found her passion rekindled. She still ran her gallery, but it was different now. It became a hub for socially conscious art, with all profits funneled directly into the foundation. She spent less time in her office and more time on construction sites, a smudge of dirt on her cheek and a blueprint in her hand. She even started painting again, setting up an easel in the new community parks they built, her work filled with a warmth and humanity that had long been absent. One sunny afternoon, 5 years after they first met, Clara and Samuel sat together on that same bench in Sterling Park. The skyline behind them had changed. In the distance, the clean, elegant lines of one of their foundation's buildings, a public library, now stood. Samuel was sketching in a new, high-quality notebook Clara had given him. He was drawing the children playing in the grass, his hand as steady as ever. "Do you ever miss it?" Clara asked quietly. "The accolades? The fame?" Samuel paused, looking at the vibrant scene before him. He saw the library, a building for the people. He saw the children, safe and inspired. He looked at Clara, his partner, his friend. "I don't build with steel and glass anymore," he said, his voice content. "We build with hope. And that is a far stronger material." The story of Samuel Blackwood became a quiet legend in the city, a powerful reminder that a person's worth is not measured by their wallet or their address. It is measured by the integrity of their character and the beauty they choose to create in the world. True value is often hidden in plain sight, and the greatest art is not what hangs on a wall, but what is built in the heart of a community, offering everyone a foundation upon which to dream.